Welcome back, everyone, to R2Kast number 72. It's quite a cool reason for me leaving Africa today. And you're probably wondering, Wallace, what do you mean? Especially if you've never watched an R2Kast before. But last week, we were in Rwanda with Regis Umugiraneza, who spoke about food and farming in Rwanda and how has worked himself up to very high in the policy side in Rwanda. So that was really cool. And next week, we'll be going to Zimbabwe to speak to a blueberry agronomist. And now, I've came back to speak to someone in the UK this week, but obviously, to have done such a thing, to go Africa, UK, Africa, it must be an important and interesting guest. And today it very much is. I've had some comments in the past about my beard. Well, I think this man maybe tops it, certainly from a hair perspective. But just before I introduce you to our guest today, I just want to say a quick thank you, because yesterday at the point of recording, Spotify Wrapped came out, when you get all the feeling like you're on LSD videos, that this is what music you've listened to and podcasts and all that sort of thing. And I found out that I was in 450 people's top 10 podcasts, 320 people's top 5, and 150 people's top 1 podcast. So that was really cool. So thanks for that. And it's quite important to mention Spotify is about 5% of my non-YouTube views. So this is going really well. It's really fun, and I'm really enjoying doing this podcast. But enough about me and enough about that nonsense. I'm going to welcome today's guest, Mr. James Edwards. James, would you like to say hello?
Hello, how are you doing?
Before we get on into another excellent episode of the R2Kast, I would just like to thank the sponsor for the show today, The Scottish Farmer, a weekly magazine highlighting everything you need to know regarding the Scottish agricultural industry, whether it's breaking news, events happening in the sector, market reports, classified ads, or just wholesome stories happening in the industry. The Scottish Farmer's got it for you.
It's this is going to be a fun one, because James originally got in touch with me. In fairness, I barely knew his name was James until about 2 days ago. He's just JJ Livestock to me on Instagram. He got in touch and asked me some questions about who I choose to have on the podcast, why, and so on. And it was very much, he said, I don't know if you're going to like this question. And we've just been, I'll not say the word I mean, but just really nasty to each other for the last month and really got to like each other, I think is the fair way to say it.
Yeah. I think it's kind of, that's very true. Certain acerbic kind of relationship, but yes. but very functional.
Absolutely, yeah. A highly functioning, offensive Instagram voice note relationship is what we've built,
and it's all about the voice note. So it's a lot better. Like writing, just typing it out doesn't really have the same kind of meaning or effect. And I think a lot of the time, if I just wrote some of the things I said, people would never speak to me again. So at least a voice note makes it sound slightly more kind of fairness. Palatable.
Yeah, well, that's it. But in fairness, I mean, even when you voice note it, I really can't be bothered responding. But
no, I know that one. I just get the thumbs up.
Oh, well, just too busy, No, no, absolutely not. James, I say it all the time, has got a good story, hence why he's on the R2Kast today. There's not many men or many people really I know quite as busy as the man we're speaking to today. I described him as, and I don't normally swear on the podcast, but here we are. I think I'm going to give you the description I gave of him yesterday after he said something to me. I said he gives off the aura of being a knob, but there really is a caring heart in there somewhere, and I genuinely think that is the best way to describe this guy.
I've already told you, Wallace, I'm going to get that on a t-shirt. That's going to be my new, my new branding.
I do expect a tag.
Yeah, you get. We already agreed. You get 10% of profits. When I hit it big with the aura of knob brand.
Can't wait for that to go viral, mate. Can't wait. But James, could you tell us a bit about your starting life? Are you from farming or?
Not originally, not entirely. So I grew up in the middle of nowhere in Wales. So I grew up in sort of sheep country, sheep and cattle country. So there's not really any arable. It's all livestock farms. In the last, I suppose, 10 years, has become more kind of lifestyle buyers. But certainly when I grew up, it was all family farms, all predominantly small family farms, lots and lots of livestock. So kind of growing up, had lots of friends, who farm sheep, and I was always around it, but didn't grow up on a farm, just grew up in the countryside. Mum was a primary school teacher. Dad managed a leisure centre, then became a lecturer. And he had, when I was a little kid, he had sort of 100 odd ewes, primarily because my parents kind of grew up in the Welsh valleys, and then they'd moved out to the kind of countryside, and Dad was, into shooting, hunting, fishing, dogs, and just the whole thing. And I think he became quite friendly with a neighbouring farmer, a really old boy from a kind of farming dynasty, 2 plastic hips and a kind of rundown farmhouse, and just a flat cap, kind of always wore a tweed jacket, proper old school farmer.
The stereotype.
Yeah, lovely chap. And him and my dad became quite friendly, and he actually took Dad to market one day, and sort of Dad ended up buying a few sheep, and then had a few rented bits of ground in the area, and just had 100 odd ewes. And so there were bits of kind of growing up that were farmy, like really low tech farmy. So I remember cutting a bit of hay with an old sit on kind of it's either a Dexter or Fergie, with a finger bar mower, you know what I mean, that kind of really little old clunky baler, and from one of the neighbors, and handballing all these little bales. And so I didn't grow up on a farm, but I did have a little bit of an introduction when I was just like a younger child, and then Dad got rid of the sheep, and that was kind of that. But so before I got into farming myself, I did know a little bit about which end of a sheep was which, and had seen a bit of the kind of farming calendar. So it was something that I knew that I was really interested in. It didn't just, come down from sort of manna from heaven. There was that planted the seed, I think, as a child. Sort of the best memories I had of being a younger child was spending time with Dad out doing, when you're a kid, you just want to go out with your dad, don't you, doing stuff. And if that stuff involves animals and dogs and clunking about outside in the countryside, then, that was it. So that's probably the reason that the seed was planted, but then went through a long time of just, very normal sort of childhood, went to school, did this, that, and the other, and went all the way through to sort of through my teens, didn't have anything to do with farming, all the way into my early 20s. And then sort of through a series of random coincidental stuff, ended up all of a sudden becoming a farmer. And then it just sort of mushroomed from there because of a few chance meetings and things. And then all of a sudden I now have to accept that I probably am a sheep farmer.
I think it would be difficult, and we'll get into this later on, for you to accept you're not a sheep farmer. I think that would be almost impossible at this point. It's quite interesting you said, you just want to be out with your dad, and it probably speaks volumes as to why I've got such a gut on me, because where Dad went was the chippy. So that was my venturing out. Dad, if you're listening, I know that was a joke. Don't take it too much. But you moved. You said you've, through a series of different conversations and whatnot, you found yourself back in farming. You have a past life as well, very much. Let's talk about that. I'm going to say nothing more than anthropology, because I, from what I understand, believe that's the study of human interaction, but that probably is wrong. So I'll let you explain what your past is.
So I went to school in kind of rural-ish Wales, in a place called Monmouth. Went to a comprehensive. Really liked history and English. Wasn't a particular fan of maths. Wasn't a massive fan of science, but liked biology, liked stuff with animals. Really liked music. Used to put on a few gigs and stuff. Like, was really into punk music and put on a few gigs in the kind of local area. And anyway, applied for university. Applied for various places to do various things. Everything from war studies in King's College London. Don't know why. Seemed like a cool story. Through to ancient history in Edinburgh. So I went to Edinburgh University to do ancient history. And as you probably know, being in Scotland, when you go to university, you do outside courses. Yep. So in my first year, I did ancient history, and I also did some classical archaeology, social anthropology, I think philosophy. Anyway, really, really liked the anthropology. It was, I think the first year, the first kind of lecture was on witchcraft. So does witchcraft exist amongst a group of people called the Azande, who are in the southern Sudan? And without wanting to go too heavily into it, yes, so then witchcraft does exist, but it acts as a sort of massive social leveler. So when something really bad happens, so you're a farmer, you've got cows, all your cows died, probably anthrax. The village goes, ooh, all your cows have died. It must have been a curse from a witch. And then they obviously all look around for the witch. And if they find the witch, they're going to do terrible things to the witch. So witches are described as, mean, unsociable, not very community spirited people. And so when the bad thing happens and all the cows die, everyone's really desperate to not be seen as a witch. So suddenly everyone's around, oh, do you want a cow? I'll give you a hand. It brings the community together because everyone's so desperate to not be seen as the witch. And then said witch hunt goes on and they decide, well, it can't be any of us because we're all really nice. And so they blame someone from another village. And so in that sense, witchcraft does exist for them and it acts as a sort of social tool. But anyways, basically first lecture in, we're talking about, African tribes and witchcraft and curses and all this stuff. And I was sold. And then I think the second thing we did was the Kalahari Bushmen in the, in the Kalahari, where they're commonly found. And we did a lot of stuff on persistence hunting, and it was just cool. And I was like, if I'm going to spend 4 years at university, going to lectures, learning something, then this is cool. Like I could do 4 years of learning about all this stuff, and it was just fascinating. And it was, Edinburgh's a brilliant university, and I had some amazing lecturers. And so I did 3-year degree and a year master's in social anthropology at Edinburgh, and lived in Edinburgh and had an amazing time, and then stayed on for a bit longer in Scotland. And during that time period, sort of filled my time with lots of other stuff. Ended up putting on some club nights. I don't know how well you know Edinburgh, but there used to be a club called the Bongo Club, which is now shut down. Yeah, which is cool. So
never been, but I've heard of it.
Yeah. It's now shut down, unfortunately, but it was really cool. So we did sort of put on club nights there, and then started running a record label, and that was great. And it was a very non-farming, non-rural, very urban lifestyle for a bit.
But see, I think quite cool and important. I don't know if I've ever told you, James, but the reason I started this podcast was a few people are asking me, like, how'd you get into farming? And that's why I love doing this whole thing, that you do not have to have been, well, you said it's important to know the front and the back of the sheep. It's always important to know the tail's at the front. And to know that the start is not always required. There's so many different ways in. But there is no way you're going to tell me that story and we're not going to go back to witchcraft. So, in the Azande in South Sudan, did you say?
Southern Sudan, yeah.
So they believe a witch is a human embodiment. There is a person on the ground that is that witch. It's not a thing up there. Yeah. Is it always female?
No.
Okay.
Male, female. Generally an adult, male or female. Doesn't there's no gender based. It's just somebody that has cursed you, and they are therefore obviously and I guess originally it probably gave them an excuse to ostracize people from the community that didn't play ball. But after a while, everyone in the community learns, and so even though you might not be the most supportive when everything's going really well, when people don't necessarily need you, the minute something somewhere for somebody goes bad, everyone pulls around them and sort of acts really positively.
There's an amazing positive response to that, isn't there? Like, that yes, maybe it might be against your will to be that positive community-driven helper, but there's not really many negative sides to that. It's quite cool that they've utilised that for you.
And that's the thing I found really interesting about anthropology. So you learned that everything has another meaning behind it. Even like the way that we sit around the dinner table, like if you look at a family and you look at the way the family sits around the dinner table, who sits where, just if you took a snapshot, a photograph of like your average family sat around eating dinner, you can kind of like start to draw out and extrapolate kind of other things from it. Like, okay, so dad's at the head of the table. So dad is seen like the male, dominant male figure. Dad is seen as the head of the family, and then where the children sit and how they kind of interact. You can start to get bigger things from just, what they like to eat and where they like to sit. There's always, everything that we do tends to have a social function, something that acts to kind of help us through society and do whatever.
I'd agree. Yeah, definitely. Yeah. And I feel like I have to ask you this question: do you, not do the Azande, do you believe in witchcraft?
So the answer to that is yes, because if it exists, like, I don't come across it a lot in daily life, but the world's a very big place and very strange things happen. And if it exists for a group of people, this is like a politician's answer now. If it exists for a group of people and it appears to exist for them, then it exists, if that makes any sense.
So existence is in the eye of the beholder.
Yeah.
Okay.
To a degree. Yeah. It's just like anything else. Beauty is in the eye of the beholder. We all see things very differently. Even perception. Like, perception is reality to a point. Definitely. Obviously, you might perceive that you can cure cancer by smoking cigarettes. Probably not going to happen. But there are, I don't know, there's probably quite a weight of scientific evidence behind this. But certainly with things that aren't so sort of scientific and physical, I think a lot of the other stuff, at the end of the day, if if the sky is blue and there are 10 of you there and you all see it's green and say it's green, is it green or is it blue? That's
like Schrodinger's sky, is it not?
Yeah, yes, exactly. It's the same thing. So, perception becomes reality, especially if you're in an isolated community or an isolated group where you all start sharing the same beliefs, same vision, same worldview. We live in a different world now. We live in a world where we have huge access to information. We can speak to people from everywhere doing all kinds of different things, different opinions. But for a long time, the world was flat.
It still is, me. No, I'm joking. I'm joking.
But you know what I mean. It didn't matter whether it's flat or not, because unless you were someone who sailed a boat over there.
Yeah, if you don't fall off the edge, who cares?
Yeah, exactly.
That's really cool. So, like, it's funny. Like, if you were to have a insular group of people now that lived by one belief, that's almost known as activism when you start talking about it,
Yeah.
But there's also an innocence to it when it's not used to further like some kind of propaganda, some kind of narrative.
Yeah.
I feel I'm just beginning to think maybe I should do anthropology because I'm really interested.
And I suppose it's the difference with, like, say, the Azande. Like, we would have more of an issue if they were people who were like, there are witches, but none of us are witches, but the other people could be witches. And they went around to other villages going and, like, sacking them and looking for the witches and persecuting people, which is kind of what we did as a culture. But because they're like, doesn't really affect us, we can only control things within our sphere, and the other village is really far away across that desert. So they just, it acts as a tool, the social kind of cohesive tool within their village. And actually, once they can't find anybody, they're like, well, they must be somewhere else.
Well, it's quite interesting that the two places you mentioned was Kalahari, second biggest desert in Africa, and then South Sudan, which is the heart of Sahara, really, heart of West.
And if I carried on with the different kind of groups of people that I did a lot of stuff with, quite fascinated. You've got, like, the Pygmies in the Congo, which are in the Ituri forest, which is pretty remote. You've got, like, the Inca Tatut and Inuit in the middle of, so sure. Yeah. So a lot of these sort of really interesting,
not tallest.
Yeah, a lot of really interesting kind of beliefs and stuff. Obviously, it all kind of stems from developing slightly within a vacuum. Which doesn't make it not true or not correct, because it's, what is, and we're getting a bit, like, deep now, but what is truth and reality? If, like I said, if 10 of you are all there and you see the sky is green, then effectively your sky is green.
No, but the what is truth and reality thing is so true. It's because that's somewhat hypocritical given the topic. This idea of Twitter's the one at the minute, isn't it? Elon Musk is going to allow Donald Trump and Kanye West their accounts back, and they're going to be spreading fake news. And I'm like, well, no, wait a minute, what's fake news? You know, what
Yeah.
is fake news? Just everything Donald Trump says? Probably. But in reality, that's not strictly true. Fake news to a lot of people is what doesn't meet their narrative.
Yeah.
And,
yeah.
you know, it's like, I vividly remember the Facebook posts when Scotland didn't get independence and people said, this isn't a democracy, we voted to leave. And I'm like, that's not what that means. This is just fitting your thing.
Yes.
So yeah, truth and reality is an interesting one because, and even when you get into science, is science technically correct? Because you can manipulate figures so easily.
Well, if you read enough papers, there's generally a paper and a counter paper, and
of course there is.
You know, and that's the nature of it is genuinely. And I mean, these days, an awful lot of science is funded by somebody. Yeah. So it's funded by a pharmaceutical company, or it's funded. I'm not now sounding like a crazy person who doesn't believe in science. There's a lot of very good science, but you know, there's always that thing, isn't it? Follow the money, or follow the kind of like the trail back. And you know, everything we do tends to have these other kind of layers and reasons behind it. And like with regards to like truth and reality, I think there are like as many layers to the onion. You know, you start peeling things away, and it's just where you choose to stop is where you're comfortable to be like, I don't need to delve any deeper than that. You know, you start looking at the big kind of conspiracy theories, things like September the 11th and all that sort of stuff. You know, you can kind of keep going deeper and deeper and deeper into the wormhole. And at some point you choose to stop and be like, that's all right. That's enough for me to form like the worldview. I don't really want to go any deeper. And some people just kind of keep boring deeper. But yeah, it's you generally shape all that sort of stuff to either fit your own narrative or just to kind of, you know, make yourself at peace and comfortable with where you are in the world or what you're doing, you know.
But I don't think you mentioned there you weren't saying you were crazy. I don't think you came across as anti-science. Like, I think it's just, if we don't accept that science can be manipulated, because it can, facts and figures can be, what you're saying might be 110% correct, but this also might be, you know, and they might be completely different things. If we don't accept that that's the thing, that's a thing, then we're almost discrediting science.
There's two good quotes. So my old man was quite a good one for quotes when I was a kid. And it probably ties. There's two. The first one is, I don't know who. I think it was possibly Winston Churchill. There's lies, damn lies, and statistics.
Okay.
And you know, and statistics can be made to sort of fit any picture or narrative. But the other one, which probably relates to some of the stuff we've talked to about, you know, my slightly acerbic nature, is that I remember being a kid and my old man sort of said to me, assume nothing, question everything, which is obviously Karl Marx.
Yeah.
And that
not
was
a popular figure, it must be said.
Not a popular figure, no. Yeah. And my father wasn't. My father isn't a communist in the slightest. He'd be horrified by that. But he's a, you know, pretty free thinking guy. And so assume nothing, question everything. And I think I've kind of probably apply that to everything and everybody, but not in an aggressive, like negative way, because you're not just taking the assumption on face value and you're questioning doesn't mean you're saying that the person is lying or is wrong. Yeah, sure. It's just you want to kind of question it and form your own sort of thoughts and opinions based upon, because, you know, a lot of people these days, unfortunately, they just get presented with, you know, news, media, whatever, you know, a paper that somebody's linked on Google or whatever, and then that's the answer, that's the truth. And actually, you know, you've got to kind of read around and dig if you want to form a more informed opinion. But actually, you don't have to. You can just, like, it's fine if you want to just take wherever you get thrown and go, yep, running with it. There's no, it's whatever kind of makes you happy, I suppose, and whatever, you know, some people want to. It's like, I've got friends who just don't watch the news because they just find it depresses them and makes them unhappy. And I wonder sometimes why I do, because I get triggered by it. But, you know, we're all...
So I was just going to say, like, you know, on the don't watch the news, I put my hand up, anyone listening wouldn't have seen it. But I don't watch the news, and it's not because I'm like, I don't watch the news. First off, it's 3 hours in the morning, can't bother that. But anyway, like, there's... The news isn't the news anymore.
No.
Yeah, there's so many. You've said it a few times already, James. Like, there's so many different ways you can find that And the word news is almost sort of lost its viability, because we would have seen the word news in the 70s and whatever as that's gospel. If BBC say it, it is right, you know. And as someone who's done some work for the BBC, I think we can all agree that's not right. You know?
No, but I think the thing is, what I find interesting is that, yes, you know, the BBC aren't just presenting you with the cold hard facts how it is, but the fact that the BBC present it in a certain way, and that shows quite a lot. That's quite an interesting commentary on, you know, why do the BBC project it like that? What are they trying to get? What is their aim? Like, why are they, you know, and that's not picking on the BBC, but whichever kind of news outlet, there is a reason that you are being made to think that it is as it is. And for someone who, like, for me, having the background in anthropology, that is as fascinating as actually what the truth is. That perception that's being kind of foisted upon people says a lot about, you know, current government policy, all this sort of stuff. Like, I'm a pretty, well, as you know, fairly critical thinking, slightly suspicious, kind of cynical person. And so I find it really, you know, like, I watch stuff like that and I read the news, not because, and I read different newspapers to an extent and things, not because I'm like, I need to get the facts and these guys are going to give me the facts, but actually it's interesting to see how they present it and then how the opposing kind of outlet presents it. And you just, you know, you get quite an interesting insight into the way our world works and our country kind of works.
That sort of goes back to that truth and reality, because we're using the BBC as an example. The reason I said BBC was because BBC not Brexit, that's basically what it's been for 5 years. Breakfast was the accepted news, for forever. You know, ever since it's been news on the telly, that's what it was. And the reason I said that was, as you said, it wasn't a target of the BBC. It was purely just that's what it was. And we're saying the BBC, and what we really mean now is news. But the most seen news now becomes, whether it's truth or not, that socially accepted reality. So what was on the news, that's what it was. And you're saying, you use the word cynical, which I think's wrong, because I think you by nature, and I think I am as well, are inquisitive. Yeah. Because, like you've said, society's been so drawn to accepting this thing we're told, and to the point of, and now I'm going to sound like one of those crazy people, which I've done many a time before, so why stop now? When that accepted new truth, whatever that might be, is there, we're so used to not questioning it. That's why you look cynical, because when someone like yourself or myself or other folk I know that do question these things, it's so far from the norm. And that's been a long, drawn-out process, you know?
There's been quite a few times that I've been accused of thinking too much. So, you know, I just think too much. You think too much into things. And it's like, well, I'm not entirely sure that's a thing. I don't think you can ever think. I mean, you can overthink things. I get that. But I don't think you can ever sort of be too inquiring. And then the other thing I get is that I spend a lot of time on my own. So my head's full of these things, and I'm like spinning it over one way, the other way, questioning it, playing it out. You know, I've like had the whole lengthy argument and debate in my head. And then I kind of end up bumping into somebody or like sitting down with somebody, and we go from like sheep, dogs to some completely random thing about society or whatever else that I'm like going to try out for fit, and just sort of like suddenly sort of in a series of questions and statements sort of throw that out and then get a funny look. And some people, obviously, you end up in a kind of debate, but a lot of people are just like, what are you on about? That's really random. You know, why, like what? Like, you think your mind's a weird place. You think of some weird stuff, but you know, it makes complete sense to me. And a lot of the time I will like present my case or my argument or my whatever, and I'm not telling you that it's right, but if I like come up with a standpoint and then you kind of come back at it, I might end up agreeing with you. But like, we've got to start somewhere. You know, we've got to start with someone's got to draw a line in the sand and be like, so I think this, I think. And then you go, no, that's bollocks because of this. And I'm like, oh, I didn't think of that. But what about this? And that's kind of, you know, that's how you hash things out. That's how you get things, where it's just accepting things. Like, I've never been one for just accepting anything, which is another thing that does my parents' head in sometimes. You know, I'll have Sunday dinner with them. And I mean, COVID was an awful thing. So my parents had like full on, you know, my opinions on what was going on and why it was going on and how it's this giant whatever it was at the time. Do you know what I mean? And they were just like, bugger off.
Yeah, and,
you know,
and you know, I think you went to say something there. I think we all know what you're going to say about it being a conspiracy, that sort of thing, and stop yourself, because it's almost been this accepted thing that's got to be there. I'm not going to come out and say COVID was a conspiracy, because I don't think it was. I have openly said I did not want a vaccine.
Have you had a vaccine?
I've had one.
So I've had no vaccines.
And I had it with peer pressure.
I'd say not. Yeah, I've not even not had them because I'm dead against the vaccines. But I at the time was really busy lambing, and I'm not registered with a doctor. I sort of didn't get round to it. I never got a letter. And then after a while, now I haven't had them, and the world's not falling apart. I'm not really inclined to just go and have a load of random vaccines shoved in my body for something which appears to not really be a big issue. But if you want to go overseas, there's all these, like you said, these pressure things. Oh, you got to get vaccinated. But I'm all right. I'm not carrying it. I'm not spreading anything. I've had COVID and been ill with it, and I'm fine. And I mean, I was really ill for a week or two with a really nasty, chest and cold or whatever. But it seems, yeah.
But it's funny you say that. We're getting into a totally different thing. This podcast is yet to be nothing about food and farming, but that's what. The thing that I always think is quite interesting, and here I am not at all saying anything against the vaccine, because I never have. I just didn't want it. I'm petrified to the point I fainted twice before getting the vaccine of needles. I mean, I don't even want to speak about them, because I don't be deadly serious. That's how weird I am about them. Like that's the thing. But I had COVID in December before I took the vaccine, and I basically went for a bath, and that was me. Yeah, I've lost my smell ever since, but nothing hit me. And then I had the vaccine, then I had COVID in June, and I had to go to hospital for blood tests. And I'm not saying that's a connection, because brains, all that sort of thing. But I didn't like the way it wasn't a choice, and I was one of the ones that said yes because I felt I had to. My family and my friends nearby weren't pressuring me. It was a pressure everywhere, and it genuinely, talking about that needle thing, it's the last thing I'm going to talk about it because I'm not good with it. The fact that everything on Facebook, Instagram, the telly was needles and vaccines genuinely played in my head. Like, I hated it.
Yeah. See, you're right there. You hit the nail on the head. So probably like my biggest gripe with it as it went on was like, I struggle with being told, like, you have to do this because we say so. Like, oh, hang on a minute. Like, I'm a free thinking human being. Like, no. And then we're going to sort of apply this other pressure to sort of bully you into it. Like, I hate bullying. The one thing that really grates on me is bullying. And I know that's a bit of an extreme way to phrase that. But you did feel a little bit like you were like, you're kind of getting bullied into doing it without any really solid evidence or background that it was going to do anything. And there's another quote for you. One of my favorites is Oscar Wilde. Disobedience is man's original virtue. It's through disobedience that progress is made. And
that's a lot of words. Disobedience
is man's original virtue. It is through disobedience that progress is made.
Oh, 100%. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, that's true, isn't it?
Yeah.
True. And I think sometimes, acquiescence to what you're just told without questioning it, generally, like through history, a lot of the times when things have not gone very well socially, a lot of it is through people just blindly going, well, you're the boss, so we're going to do what you say.
Sure.
And all following. And we look back and now the people who were like, nah, mate, stuff you, are now people we write about in history often as being, like stand-up guys. Not saying that the vaccine is the same thing, but
no.
It's important. I just think it's important to not just acquiesce because you're being told that this is what's best for you.
It's the topical conspiracy. That's but not that I think COVID itself was a conspiracy, not at all. And maybe you do, and I have no problem with someone thinking that. Both sides are interesting, but that's the only reason I really came onto that itself. But next week, listeners, I do plan to bring on the opposite, and someone that believes that bullying is good.
but it's funny though. So it links back to that stuff we were saying about science and truth. Like at the end of the day, like I'm sure COVID very real. Do you know what I mean? People died from it. It was very real. It was very nasty. It was quite a serious thing. But there's always people who profit from everything.
Of course.
And you start tracing it back, and you start tracing back the science is funded by certain drug companies who are then, run by certain people who are going to stand to make billions of pounds if we all get vaccinated. And that's when I start feeling uncomfortable. You start looking around and you think, hang on a minute, like somebody is making a shitload of money out of this. And there's always someone making a shitload of money out of everything. That's apart from farming. But then you start thinking, well, I'm being very strongly encouraged to do something, pressured to do something. And I can't see a huge benefit for me, but I can see quite a lot of benefit for Bayer or whatever,
Pfizer, whoever. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So that the little, like, going right back through to like being a teenager, the little punk kid who was like, screw the man. It's the same thing. I've always been a bit of a, like, I've always been that kid. Like, and I still am. I'm 38 and I'm still that kid, as you can probably tell. Yes. So just a little.
Sorry.
I was going to say a little bit of civil disobedience is quite a good virtue sometimes, as long as it's not taking the piss too much,
Yeah, for sure. There's agreed. And I am conscious we are currently about 40 minutes in, and we've said sheep about 4 times, and that's about it. So for those of you listening that have really enjoyed that deep chat about stuff that I didn't have a clue what I was talking about, and James seemed pretty smart on, I'm glad you've enjoyed it. If you are interested in hearing about the food and farming side, we'll try and progress on to that now. You said earlier, James, sort of not from a farm, but you were around the sector as a kid. And then you found yourself coming back into it 10 years ago, give or take, roughly?
So I've been in Hampshire since 2015. So what's that, 7 years? Yeah, so 12 years, probably, something like that. 11, 12 years, something like that, yeah.
And what was it that made that happen? So you've basically went anthropology, master's in anthropology, bachelor's in history. It's not leaning itself towards
no.
What happened?
No, so I did my degree, went overseas, lived in various parts of Eastern Europe, ran some backpackers hostels, taught English, had lots of adventures, met a girl, moved back to the UK because that seemed like she was from the UK and wanted to come back and stuff. That didn't work out. Ended up living back with my folks who live in the middle of nowhere in Wales, and was at that weird crossroads where you're like, kind of got to do something for a minute. And I sort of, ended up getting a job as a gamekeeper. I was counselling children in schools. So I also did another master's degree. So I did a master's degree in social pedagogy, which is a whole other wormhole we could go down, but we probably better not.
I'm currently doing a master's level in higher and tertiary education, which involves a lot of different pedagogies at higher levels. Yeah. So it is a word I've actually heard.
So my dad would have described himself as a pedagogue, and that is what he lectured in and sort of wrote stuff in, and is pretty sharp cookie. And so I kind of ended up sort of falling into that. Did a master's in social pedagogy, and ended up counselling children in a high school, and also teaching Duke of Edinburgh, running Duke of Edinburgh sort of courses and assessments, taking kids on expeditions, doing summer camps, teaching kids bushcraft, all kinds of stuff like that, which is great. And I got a job as a gamekeeper as well on the side through a random conversation at the side of the road. And so was working with kids, keepering on a sort of large farm, about 1,000 acres. It was a private shoot, and they had sheep and cattle, and just sort of like had my interest really sparked again. There was a field by the side of the road on the way into the estate, which is sort of 4 acres of bramble, owned by an old chap who used to be a butcher. And when he was a butcher, he'd use that field to put a few fat cattle or whatever before they went to slaughter in a local slaughterhouse to go to the butcher shop. Anyway, I sort of approached him and said, any chance of me renting this field off you? And he sort of said, yeah, sure thing, but I'll come to sell it one day probably, and then you'll have to kind of just get off. So I won't charge you any money. And it's just an unfenced bramble patch. And actually, coming on to the future bit, I ended up buying it when he sold it. So that's now my little piece of Wales. So it's back in Wales. And so I ended up in Hereford Market one day, watching the pigs being sold. Pig prices were on their arse. There was a sow and 8 saddleback piglets, and someone was sort of saying, "Oh, well, we'll just buy them, sort of bang the piglets on the head, or get rid of them and put the sow back in the coal ring, which would be worth more like that." And me being a softie, I ended up buying said sow and piglets, brought them home, cobbled together some random fencing, had pigs, which was just, this is again long-suffering parents, because I was living back in a wooden cabin in their kind of garden. Yeah. And this is it, like, oh, James has come home with 9 pigs. Brilliant. We have pigs. So the pigs were hilarious. So we electric fenced it, put them in. There was the occasional, like, the pigs have gone. Where have the pigs gone? They've gone up the road. One day, one of our neighbours had a really nice vegetable patch.
Oh, no.
And it was a full-grown saddleback sow and 9 fairly well-grown weaners in said vegetable patch. So hopefully they wanted it rotivated, because that's what happened. But and sort of,
I think it's important to ask, what time of year was that vegetable patch attacked?
Luckily it wasn't mid-spring or summer. It was towards the latter part, so it was, they were just mopping up. It was fine. But did the whole, like, this is being a farmer, chasing my escaped stock down the road, and paddling around in mud in the dark and all this stuff. So it was character building. So did that, ended up sort of getting a few more pigs, fattening pigs, selling them in boxes. I think I said earlier on I was allergic to gluten, so making kind of gluten-free sausages and things like that. Or I wasn't making them, local butcher was, really good local butcher. And so I was selling a few of those, and decided to get some sheep, because that's what I really wanted to get. And there was a lady up the road who had a little farm, and I sort of rented a very small field off her with a trampoline, which is what she allowed me, sort of like half an acre or something in the front of a house, and bought 2 ewe lambs and got given the sort of bottle fed triplet free, and so I had 3 sheep. And anyway, decided 3 sheep was like, why was I coming and staring at 3 sheep? Spoke to the woman, she quite liked the sheep, went and bought more, had about 120, I think, for that first lambing. Never lambed outside before. Got drunk one night, went on pre-loved, ended up buying a collie pup that was in someone's house, like, in the Forest of Dean. So went and got said collie pup, who I'd never seen his parents, never seen around sheep. And that was mad keen and mad as a box of frogs. Turned out to be the best dog I've ever owned. Still got her. She's an absolute star, Twig. And sort of just started farming, really. And the estate, the big farm estate where I'd been doing some keepering, they had about 800 ewes, and I think it was like 50 or 60 suckler cattle and stuff. There's a chap there, David, who's very kind to me and sort of lent me his dog, came over and helped me get sheep in and bits to start with, and just sort of, it was a brilliantly dry, very knowledgeable kind of guy, just one of those like true rural kind of characters. So he squared me up quite a lot and brought my expectations back down to reality. And I spoke to him the other day, and I said something about, like, jokingly sort of said, well, I'm slightly regretting my life decisions now, David, in the middle of the winter, paddling in mud, blah, 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 10 years on. And he went, well, I did try to tell you. I've been doing it since I was 15, and I'm in my 60s now, and I could have told you that a long time ago. So, but, so that was great. So did all that sort of stuff. Did that for a while. Trained the collie. She got really good. Started doing a bit of contract work for other people. One guy who, I can't think what band he was in, but he's known as Roger the Rockstar, because he was in one of these sort of 80s bands. I wish I could remember, but I had like one big hit. Bought a farm, bought some ground, had some sheep, or decided he wanted to establish a sheep flock. So doing a bit of contract work for that. And just sort of went along like that, and then ended up meeting a lady from Wales who was running a contract management company, and she'd just taken on a big estate in Hampshire called Kingsclear Estates. A guy called Tim May, to basically run a big livestock, regenerative agriculture livestock thing there, but they needed a shepherd. And one thing led to another, and I basically went down there, met on the side of the M4, jumped in the car, went down, thought, this is pretty cool. And within a couple of weeks was going down every week or two. And within a month had quit my job, packed my bags, taken the dog and moved to Hampshire, basically. Left the sheep with my old man to sort of chaperone while I was away. And then they followed me down. So I went down in, I want to say September, October, and they came down kind of Christmas, January times. They're only back for a couple of months. But yeah, and then that was basically 1,700 ewes to start, mob grazing, all in one mob, daily moves, big herbal lays, like
daily moves, right?
Yeah, wow. Daily moves. Yeah. So it was, you know, it was proper kind of, it was a full bore sort of regenerative agriculture project, aiming to improve soil fertility and all that kind of stuff from an estate. There's a really good, if anyone's on YouTube, there's a video called One Man, His Mud and His Mutt, which is something that Tim, who's the guy who runs Kingsclear, who's like an incredible bloke, put up years ago, right at the beginning of the project, like right when he first bought the sheep, which was just before I came. And it explains, you know, they'd been wheat barley mm-hmm. for a long time, very little topsoil, you know, not great soil fertility, lots of chemicals, that kind of model of farming. And it worked for a long time. And they, you know, in the past they'd had livestock there, they'd had dairy, and they'd had a Jersey dairy and made ice cream. They'd had rabbits for, I think, skins, and chickens for vaccine, like culturing eggs and all kinds of stuff, like really anything, you know, like really diverse place. And the livestock had all fallen out as livestock had become less profitable in that model. And the sheds were more profitable to obviously let out for industrial units and that sort of stuff. So they'd gone to a wholly kind of arable model. And that had been obviously great for a lot of years, but then there's diminishing returns as the whole country's kind of finding. And so Tim went and did a Nuffield, and then he came back and he started to integrate livestock into the estate. And that's kind of a year or two in, they had a load of sheep, didn't really have a shepherd. Tim was doing a lot of the sheep himself, just had another child, needed a shepherd. And that's kind of how I ended up down there. So I went down there, and then the lady who I was working for lost her marbles in the nicest possible way, stopped answering the phone or emails or anything. And I got left with two awesome lambing students, who we'd found, who were just come back from the Northern Territories in Australia. So they'd spent ages catching kind of feral cattle in national parks and all kinds of stuff. So they were pretty cool with, like, you know, livestock, big numbers. So we just sort of boshed on and lambed all the sheep, and did that. And then basically, to cut a long story short, the lady never reappeared, and the tender, when I back out for contract, I tendered for it, and found myself now running a business rather than being a sort of a contract shepherd, I guess, just doing one place. So that was the start of. So I had some of my own sheep, and I was doing Kingsclears, and then it kind of went from there, and we started doing more contracting in the local area for different places, tack sheep, store lambs. My flock kind of increased in size, got a little bit big for my boots, and started taking on everything all at the same time. Ended up at one point, I think we were about 8,000 ewes spread across. And how
big you was that?
There was me, my other half at the time, and really then very few staff. Like that was the massive issue, being like a couple of staff, but this was the massive issue. It was getting decent, which is a huge problem in agriculture, getting decent, reliable staff who could kind of hack it. And at that point, I probably wasn't the easiest person to work for. Like, I've kind of, you know, I didn't get into it to run a business with loads of staff. So I'm quite good with sheep and dogs, not necessarily the greatest with people.
What was your master again?
Social anthropology and social pedagogy, two entirely people-based things. Yes. So yeah, exactly. There is an irony there. So I've kind of learned a lot now. I've definitely got a lot better. But long story short, there was lots of different people wanting to pull you in different directions. Lots of different people who thought that their estate with their sheep was the most important thing, and all that stuff. And a lot of the estates around here, they're kind of used to the model of like employed shepherd, employed this, you know, like at their beck and call all the time. And so yeah, we ended up cutting down a few places, and then I was still doing Kingsclear, and I had a nice tenant farm for a while, which unfortunately was then mismanaged by the people who owned it, which was an organic research trust, and they sold it for horse paddocks about 6 months into my 10-year time there, and booted me out of the house. cheers guys, just before Christmas with all my sheep. And so I retreated back to Kingsclear. At that period, we sold Kingsclear's sheep, which had built up to about 2,500, and exchanged them for my own, which had built up to about 1,000. And yeah, so I sort of then built my sheep up. So I think probably at the most I was running about 1,500 of my own ewes, and then various tack ewes, store lambs. So tack ewes are basically ewes that come down on holiday bed and breakfast from either Wales, or we were having a lot up from the Romney marshes. So lots of cover crops in the winter, electric fencing and stuff like that. Store lambs, used to buy a lot of store lambs and finish them, buy draft ewes, put them in lamb, sell those, and then do a load of contracting for other people. And yeah, that's kind of where we've been. And then I know this is like a really like whistle stop tour, but basically Kingsclear has got an expanding, awesome sort of grass-based open air mobile dairy, and we were just sort of rubbing up against each other. There's you know, like as the cow numbers increase and the sheep numbers had to decrease.
Sure.
So there was an awesome place next door that we'd already had sheep on, and it was bought by somebody who wanted to do a regenerative agriculture project. Winner, chicken dinner. Tim at Kingsclear took on the sort of contract management of it. We went into sheep. It was reseeded with herbal lays. It was all great, really, really positive. And then the lady who owned it, who's a 37-year-old Malaysian model with links to questionable Chinese businessmen, I'll say no more, decided overnight to rewild it, and got on with a great guy who I'll also name drop, a guy called Derek Gow, Mr. Beaver, who hates farmers and loves beavers. And beavers are the most important thing in the world. And so,
of course, yeah.
So now you've got a 1,000-acre estate with, I think, like 8 longhorns, 3 Tamworth, 4 Tamworth pigs, and potentially now 2 beavers. So it's not really been rewilded. But anyway, long story short, we landed in April this year into May, end of June. We had to pack our bags with about 1,200 ewes in the estate, plus all the lambs at foot, and do one somewhere else, which turned out to be Shropshire. So I made a deal with a chap there who basically had, funnily enough, staff problems, lost, I think, 2 or 3 shepherds in a short space of time. So he had a lot of sheep, about 4,500 ewes. So I went up there, and I should probably say that. So I keep a wool shedding composite, ex-lanas, which ex-lana means no wool in Latin. So they're a really efficient wool shedding sheep, really ideally suited to sort of extensive systems. And I'm a bit of we've had a closed flock. Those are when I first bought that 100 ewes, that's what I bought. So they've been a closed flock for a long time, and they're a pretty efficient flock of sheep. And
how
this
would
chap
you compare to the Easy Care?
Sorry, say again?
How would you say compare to the Easy Care?
So the Easy Care sheep, basically the best of the ex-lanas and the best of the Easy Care would be pretty much the same thing.
Right, okay.
It's just that the ex-lanas would probably be all recorded, and so there's a bit more science and figures behind it. But like the best of both would be fairly hard to distinguish in the field from each other or performance. Right. It's just that the Easy Care thing is quite a broad church. So you could go and buy Easy Care sheep that have been creeped as lambs, caked, messed about with, whatever. Whereas I guess the ex-lanas, you're more buying into a brand, into a kind of ideology.
I was thinking around, right? Okay, got you. Yeah.
In terms of so you're buying ex-lanas from the ex-lana breeding group. There's one set group of people who've got different kind of people, obviously, that supply ewe lambs to them. So we breed ewe lambs, which we sell through the ex-lana group. So you'd contact the ex-lana guys and say, hey, I want 200 ewe lambs. And they might contact me. The 200 ewe lambs would come from me, but I can only sell them through them if they've been, born outside. They've got a certain health status, blah, 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 blah. And they fit a certain kind of set of values and criteria. You go to the Easy Care Society sale and you'll have lots of very good sheep. You don't know what else, they're not bad sheep at all. They're very, very, very similar. So, I don't even know where we were, but anyway, how far we got, Wallace?
You were getting pretty close to where we are now, is what I understand. You've just came
in Shropshire, yes. The chap in Shropshire had the same kind of sheep. So wool shedders, lots of Easy Cares, actually, really good Easy Cares, and using ex-lana rams and a load of Romneys. And so went up to Shropshire, spent the summer up there, helped get the sheep sort of squared up there, and had the summer grazing. And unfortunately, probably would still be there now, but the drought happened. No cover crops went in, no grazing. I was actually speaking to the chap today, and he's still really struggling for winter keep. And obviously, I had to get my sheep off there in the winter. So I've currently got sheep in Lincolnshire, North Lincolnshire, as far up as the Humber Bridge, or looking at the Humber Bridge. So probably closer to you than me currently. And I've got sheep in Wales. I've got sheep in West Sussex, and I've got sheep in Hampshire and West Berkshire. So
well, it's funny you say this, because we were on the phone or whatever, I don't know, 2 weeks ago, and we're just trying to arrange a date to film this, and you were like, for those of you that can't see, the camera's on me. When the camera's on me, quite often James will have a drink of his pina colada that he likes to sort of move away from his hard person facade. If you make a noise, they'll see you when you do that. You've got to like.
Okay. I've got to speak while I wave the pina colada. Second pina colada of the conversation.
Of course. You've got to deal with me. And I was like, what suits this week? And you were like, all right, so tomorrow I'm in Wales, then Shropshire, then Hampshire, then Lincolnshire, then Surrey. And I was like, right, I've just got to go 10 miles from work, like whatever suits you, And I was beginning to think, like, why is this man doing this? So could you give us a bit of an idea? You've said everywhere, that's everything's everywhere. What sort of numbers you've got at the minute, and what a day, a week in the life of you is at the minute?
Yeah, so this year, obviously with the drought and stuff, we started selling sheep. So we have cut down to, I'm never quite sure how many sheep we've got. We've cut down, it's about 1,000 odd ewes, like older mature breeding ewes there, maternal ewes, ex-Lanas, and then we run about 150 chamois ewes, which were terminal breeds.
Yeah.
And then there's a bunch of ewe lambs as well, and then there's obviously a load of store lambs and killing lambs around. So we've got, I think there's about, I want to say 800 odd in Lincolnshire that are a mixture of lambs and ewes. There's probably another, I don't actually know, there's a couple of hundred in Wales. There are a couple of hundred or so in West Sussex. To point out, like West Sussex, Hampshire, West Berkshire are actually quite close to each other.
Yeah,
so West Sussex, just over the border, just in case anyone's from Scotland and thinking, Jesus, this is crazy. The sheep, I've got sheep in Hampshire that are then 40 minutes away from the sheep in West Sussex, which are then an hour away from the sheep in West Berkshire. So then we've got a few hundred, like I don't quite know what we've got dotted around Hampshire, but quite a few dotted around Hampshire, several hundred. And then we've got another couple of hundred or so in West Berkshire. So it's not huge numbers at the moment. We were running
about 2,000. About 2,000.
Yeah, there'd be in excess of 2,000 sheep around the place. There'd be, there's probably 1,200 breeding mature ewes around, and then a couple of hundred ewe lambs, and then killing lambs. I mean, there's probably still about 800 killing lambs around. So 2,000 odd sheep. And we, again, in a normal year, would have bought a lot more store lambs. But this year, with a lot of the cover crops not going in, it's just, the store lambs are very cheap, so it really hurt. There was a period when nobody obviously has any keep because of the drought. So there were a lot of cheap store lambs around. So I had to sit on my hands.
There's a reason for that. There's a reason.
Yeah, exactly. But I did go through a brief period where I was like, I'm just going to buy them. And my father and various other people were like, don't think that's very sensible. So normally we go and buy a couple of thousand or a few thousand store lambs and finish those. But we're scraping around this year. So in a normal year, we have a massive abundance of cover crops. So we live in an area with a lot of arable farms. So we are usually fairly shorter on grazing. So everything's run on short-term lets, no FBTs, no tenancies, nothing like that. Everything's a 12-month grazing license, or even just a couple of months here or there. But we are slightly ground poor in the summer in terms of, trying to find. So we do sort of temporary grass breaks places or some permanent pasture and stuff. But in the winter, autumn, winter, and into early spring, we usually have rakes of cover crops, so like oats and vetch. turnips, various mixed greening crops and stuff like that, and some like Westerwold, ryegrass, and all sorts of stuff. And so we can go massively up in numbers in the winter. So we would normally every year take in a ruck attack sheep from Wales from one lady, and this is the first year we haven't done it. And that would be a mixture of ewes and her killing lambs. So she'd send all her lambs down here. We'd finish them all, send them through to ABP, and then we'd buy stores, drafts, and and other bits and bobs. And we would, so in a normal year, we'd have at least double, but probably triple or more what we've got now. And there's usually two of us, or two and a bit of us, that sort of bounce around and do it.
Are they like employees of yours, or?
So up until I went to Shropshire. It's a great chap that had been working for me, a guy called Luke, who has some of his own sheep, and was pretty much, so again, before I went to Shropshire, we were contract farming 700 cattle as well, fattening cattle, organic fattening cattle. So he was basically a self-employed contractor to a point, but was pretty much working for me or in various projects that I was involved with full time. We'd have like several thousand sheep round plus 700 cattle. And then there's another chap called Greg, who is affectionately known as the Hampshire Cowboy. He is an absolute star. And he is a long-suffering friend of mine that lives in the village. Again, he's got his own sheep, shears, does various contract fencing and stuff, and tends to come on for me when it's needed. So now we've cut down numbers. It's me, and then Greg does 2 days a week, and Luke is now full-time arable farming because he's a man of many talents and can actually drive a tractor, whereas I can't even turn them on. So it's an interesting time, actually. We've kind of cut right down, and like I like big numbers of stock. Like I like big numbers of sheep, and I like my dogs are why I farm sheep. So we do quite a lot of contracting. So I've been doing more contracting for various people, and generally the places we go will be the sort of 2,000-3,000 ewe flocks, because of the nature of kind of quite used to handling big numbers of sheep. Got good dogs, got quite a lot of dogs.
And do you take handling systems then, James? Do you have like a Pratley or something like that, or do they have those stuff there?
Yes, we've got a very bad rap around a Pratley, but to be honest, most of they've done a lot of miles and had a lot of sheep through it. But most of the places we go, so we do a lot. So one of the main guys that we do a load of contracting for are guys called Kaipo Romneys, which are based in Hertfordshire, and they would be the guys at Wiry Romney UK, one of the sons from that family, and they've sort of gone off and done their own thing. And then his wife is a woman called Jo Franklin, who's like the most incredible, just incredible woman, sort of big arable farming background. And so they are farming a couple of thousand acres of arable, sort of 2,500 Romney ewes, and then they've got a milking flock of about 350 milking sheep and a parlour they've built and all this stuff, and they do some amazing stuff. And they also, there's a running theme here, currently don't have a shepherd. So if anybody awesome who's listening to this wants or is looking for an awesome job, that job will be getting advertised in the spring for a shepherd there, and they would be like incredible people to work for, with a really amazing system, forward thinking, just like lovely people. So if there is anybody
got a couple of people in mind,
who's an aspiring shepherd, like they are really cool. And it is in Hertfordshire, so it's in the southeast, but lovely people anyway. So we go down there kind of a couple of days a week at the moment, or I say me and the dogs go down there a couple of days a week, stay over there and do some work, actually with an awesome Scottish chap. So their arable guy is a Scottish chap, Jamie, who's just like got foisted into the sheep. He comes from a Scottish cattle farming background, so he's had to jump in with both feet since he's not a shepherd. So I go down there and I'll only work now for people I like. I'll only work with people I like. There's enough work out there that I don't want to go and work for somebody I don't like or don't enjoy their company. And I go down and it's like 2 or 3 days in a row doing, and we get a lot done. Like we'll go and, we're flat out from sort of first light to last light, and we'll go, we handle a lot of sheep and a lot of different groups and just pretty efficient. But I go down there and I get a truck given to me. There's Pratley's there, there's the kit. So I take the dogs down and we smash out, a week's work in 2 or 3 days, and then I kind of bounce and working with I've forgotten how great Scottish people can be to, working with Jamie is really good crack. so that's it. So there's loads and loads of work out there, and we do quite a lot of contracting. Just been kind of half-assed to go lambing. I don't do a lot of lambing for people. Again, I'm usually busy with my own stuff, but next year there is a chap I might go and do some lambing for in Germany. Really awesome guy doing like I think they're about 10,000 ewes, but they've had to cut down to about 8,000 because of a lack of staff. See the theme? And so they're fairly up against it. I think there's like 2 or 3 of them brothers on about 8,000 ewes. Awesome grass-based system. So they're lambing quite late. They'll lamb through June as well and into July. So so I kind of pick and choose my contract work now, and I'm really only interested in big numbers of sheep, running my dogs, and places where they're running similar systems to me. I'm not, I can go indoor lambing people, and I'm pretty good at it, but it just doesn't really sort of float my boat massively. I like grass-based systems, outdoor lambing, people doing interesting stuff, and people who are passionate about what they do, and people who are just nice people. And then I'll go and bend over backwards for them.
That last is got a big part in it. Like if you're working with someone, you're like, you are just whatever. You're like, why am I doing this? I can get it elsewhere.
I hope you've kicked your feet up and got comfy and enjoying another fantastic episode of the R2Kast with another really interesting guest. I would just like to quickly take another second to plug the sponsors of the show today, the Scottish Farmer, and I would strongly advise you to go out and pick one up this week and see even more of the fantastic people that are in our industry.
Yeah, and at the end of the thing, unfortunately, in shepherding, there's like a glass ceiling to sort of how much you can charge. Mm-hmm. So, I charge a set amount, and pretty much like, if I'm going to work for you, who's a dick, I'm getting paid the same if I go and work for that fella over there who's a nice guy. So exactly. if next Wednesday someone who's a bit of a dick wants me to go and work for them for the same amount of money as someone who's really nice, it's a no-brainer. Like, sure, I'm going to go, so that's it. And there's so many really nice people who can't get shepherds and staff. There's a lot of like idealistic kind of shepherds, I guess, or people who are like young and want to get into it, but there doesn't appear to be, like, I think one of the issues is a lot of people want to get into farming because they want to be the farmer, which is fine. They want the image. They kind of like all this idea, but actually there are some amazing operations out there with quite a decent number of stock doing amazing stuff. They've got the equipment in the background and the connections and the access to land, which is a massive one. And you can go and become part of that, and you can work with, work for and then with them. A bit like when I came to Kingsclear, I came to work for somebody and then ended up working with people and then ended up having my own stock there, and I've kind of progressed. And I think, it's very easy to desperately want to farm 300 sheep of your own at a loss for 5 years and then give it up because it's miserable, as opposed to looking for the sort of 10, 15 year model and, work for someone else for 5 years with a decent number of stock, really build up your skills, your connections, start your side hustles. So as an example, the chap Jamie I was talking about, who works with my friends, he's like, met some other people that he does bits with, and there's a shed there, and they're now rearing calves. So they, between them, him and another chap, they've now invested and bought some calves and blah blah. And I kind of, working with Rob and Joe on the contracting, they've asked me to have a look at the dairy, and there's all these things. People want to kind of help people and bring people in and work with people if you've got the right attitude and you graft. And I think getting involved with people who are already doing it well and to a good level, if you're savvy enough to see that, there's a lot of arseholes out there to work for. So, you're better off just moving on from that. But at the end of the day, to be able to go and work with somebody already set up, you will learn something, especially if you're a young person, a young shepherd getting into it. And if you can get skin in the game, or just knowledge and skills, or just building up capital, a lot of these jobs, you've got a house, you've got a truck, you've got limited kind of outgoings. People are paying like a decent shepherd, and this is gonna rock the boat, but a decent, good flock managing shepherd is worth 40 grand at least, 40, 50 grand.
Completely agree.
If I'm going to work for you full time as a flock manager on a decent sized unit, I kind of want like 40k, a nice house and a truck. Mm-hmm. And, if you're running 3,000 ewes, I will try and add that to add the value to your business. It's like 20 grand for a shepherd is just a bit like, come on, mate. Like, you can earn £18 an hour stacking shelves in Tesco on a night shift, petrol nights.
It's half the hours
Yeah. Yeah. So at the end of the day, like that's what it's worth. But you know, if you're a young bloke or young lass who's like doing that, and you can put some money away, you know, there's facility to build up capital, to build up contacts, to build skin in the game. And if you look at like the 50, you know, not even very long, the 15-year pictures, you're 25 and you're looking to 40, then that's where you get people who start to, you know, build their own business, maybe even buying a bit of land, getting a tenancy, whatever. You get a lot of people I see, you know, go straight in, like trying to apply for a tenancy, and they've got like a couple hundred sheep or so on rented to ground, not really making a lot of money, blah, blah, blah. And then they're applying for tenancies and they don't understand why they're not getting it. But someone else who's done 10 years and like shown that kind of, you know, it's yeah. And I mean, there are lots of stuff about applications to tenancies that are wrong, and it's a closed shop and it's already like, it's already a done deal. But I think people forget, like, it's actually quite easy to just get into farming, especially sheep. Like, not cattle, because equipment's expensive and you've got TB, not arable because you can't afford a combine and you can't just go and plant some corn, and you know. But actually sheep, you know, I mean, man, sheep aren't overly expensive. You know, most people can go and buy themselves some sheep and become a sheep farmer, a shepherd or something.
Yeah, for sure. And that's quite an interesting thought in itself, because I mean, you said the word easy. It's easy if you're willing to put a graft in. Now, there's two different things there, you know. It is a tricky one to get into, but I mean, you're proof yourself.
I think what I meant was, it's easy to like it's easy to just go to somewhere. Yes. You can go and get a holding number on the internet, find an old lady down the road with 10 acres that she doesn't want to do anything with, go and buy a few sheep, put them in there. You're now farming sheep. It's not easy to like sustain that, make money at it, be good at it, and actually, you know, but you can access into the industry relatively simply, you know, as opposed to like cattle, which are a bit more complicated, or arable. Do you know what I mean? And that's why I started with sheep, you know, because I could just go and buy some sheep, stick, dog, sheep. I'm a sheep farmer. But it's routes for progression and development and all that sort of stuff, that and long-term sustainability and growth as an industry, and obviously individual businesses. That's the really tricky bit. Like, that's the really, and I think I've mentioned it a few times in various formats, but there's a really, really good Nuffield scholarship. That's the sort of thing that floats your boat, by a guy called Michael Blanche. The Farming Ladder. Wrote a Nuffield scholarship called the Farming Ladder. If you Google Nuffield Scholarship Farming Ladder or Michael Blanche Farming Ladder or whatever, that will come up. And he talks about the difficulty, not necessarily in entry, but in, you know, what happens after entry, like how to build a business, and the fact that, you know, you've got to be top 5%. You've got to have a certain, and he said all the successful new entrants he met that built a business and did well, they all had a similar kind of attitude. They all had a similar kind of outlook. You know, they're kind of like, yeah, well, it is what it is. There's no point moaning about it. Let's just crack on. He said, actually, the Brits were kind of the worst of them, because we always had a moan and felt a bit self-entitled. Whereas if you went around a lot of the rest of the world, people were just like, well, it ain't going to be easy. Do you know what I mean? Like, and are cracking on. So I think it's that. And in British farming, you know, traditionally there's been a like landowner owns farm, worker works on farm. Worker is only working on farm because he isn't good enough for anything else and left school, and, you know, likes to chase cows and buy tractors. And that's changed. You know, there's so many bright young people. Like, you'll see them yourself doing what you do.
Yeah, absolutely.
Really, really bright young people who could be game changers for the industry. But it's, how do we get them to be able to progress through the industry to they're the ones in the driving seat? They're the ones making decisions. You know, and especially it'd be amazing if there was some, like, similar to a Kiwi share farming, share milking model. You know, there's some really cool guys that have gone to New Zealand with a stick and a dog. A lot of Dutch guys, not a dog necessarily, stick and a quad, you know, a lot of Dutch guys, but Brits as well, who've gone out there, started milking, ended up buying a farm, ended up buying another farm. Do you know what I mean? And actually there's one guy whose name escapes me who did exactly that. He's a Scottish guy, Robert something. And he went over there, ended up buying 2 farms, then came back to the Highland show for a piss up with mates, met his lass, proposed to her pretty much there and then, went back, sold the farms, came back, bought another farm here. Do you know what I mean? I think this is all done under the age of 30.
Yeah. You should look up farming partners. I don't know if it's dairy based. It's funnily enough very topical, because we just had our winter show. You might have seen me posted about it. and we had farming partners donate one of the cups for our points trophy. And basically what they did was Maureen and Brendan moved over from Ireland. I do want to get them on the podcast. Moved over from Ireland and wanted to expand into the dairy industry somehow. They didn't really strictly care exactly how.
Yeah.
And they've created this sort of partnership between landowners, like you've been saying throughout, that aren't really that involved. They've got this money, that this land, they don't really care about it. And then they've created this system of sort of climbing we could talk about Michael Blanche here, climbing a ladder on the farming partners management scheme that you then twin up with that owner. You then start to gain a percentage of ownership. And then it's really cool, actually. So there's schemes out there like that.
But that's the issue. It's we need more of that, and it's just very difficult. It's all tied into the nature of land ownership, and tax, and all these other things. And one of the big, like, I'm going to upset someone again, but one of the big barriers for a lot of this stuff, bloody land agents.
Oh,
like, they spend their life trying to block the communication between folk like myself and folk who own land. And folk who own land want the protection of that, but there's always these other agendas, and there's always more fingers in it. And a lot of time, if you can just make the connection with somebody, don't get me wrong, land agents really have their place in lots of ways. And I've just put in a tender today for a block of grazing in Essex, actually, coastal sea marshes and salt marshes, so 886 acres.
And right on the coast.
Yeah, right. So one road in, one gate, 3 sides surrounded by sea.
Bradwell?
So basically,
Bradwell?
Place called Old Hall Marshes.
Oh, so there's like 2 peninsulas. That's the North Peninsula.
The North Peninsula, yeah.
Yeah, so, I worked at South Peninsula 2 summers.
Yeah, it's a beautiful part of the world. I've never been. Drove down there, wasn't expecting it to be like it was. Beautiful.
It's beautiful. Yeah.
So I've employed a land agent to help me with the tender, stuff like that. Lovely, brilliant guy. Works at companies called Series Rural. Just like lovely chap. Really useful. But I've also had experiences in the past of trying to sort of rent grazing or speak to people and just happen to get someone who's anti sheep, anti what, and you're like, if I could, do you know what I mean, if I could speak to the landowner, actually there's a lot of stuff they could do with like putting in GS4 and all these things that would benefit them. So there's British farming is kind of a weird thing. It's quite a strange beast. There's a lot of opportunities, but it's also never simple.
No,
and
for sure.
As I've experienced with loss of grounds. The biggest thing, I think, the single biggest thing for people like myself and other people trying to get in is just access to ground and security of tenure. Having access to the ground and not having it for only 12 months, so you can actually put yourself into it. That would be the biggest barrier, I would think.
And I mean, you must be the 20th person I've had on this podcast saying that. It's just the running theme.
It is the 2 themes are, for people like me, access to ground, and for people with an established business, even like myself, who build it up, access to good staff, which is strange when you think that there are loads of really, really passionate young people wanting to get into farming all over the shop, and there are loads of operations you can't find people to come and do it, which I don't know how you kind of fix that.
It's almost like that connection there, that recruitment side isn't there in agriculture, which again is a shock, because there's DeLacy, 4 extra hands, about 5 more. That's terrible, but anyway, it's there. You mentioned earlier, James, about how there's a lot of great new entrants out there, and that takes me on to the next point. I'm sure you know what this point is. You have certainly proven to be one of them, and I think recognised as that in the last few months. You were at an award ceremony that you were that was a very successful night for you. Could you tell us what I'm talking about?
Yeah, so the British Farming Awards. So I won new entrant against the odds category at the British Farming Awards, which I think if you translate that title, it means who's been hit with a shitty stick long enough and still standing. That's
against the odds. It's not the best name, really, that is it?
No, but that is basically it. It's like it's not even. I don't even know if it's being recognised for your successes, or the fact of like you've eaten a lot of shit and you are still here trying to carry on. Because it's not like I'll openly say like my farming business, but my farming life for my own stock. And I kind of forget sometimes when I talk about my farming business, I quite often think about just my stock. Whereas actually the farming business is greater, the contract, the consultancy, all this stuff, it's all, that is my farming business. But the bit I'm really passionate about is obviously my own stock. And that's probably at the lowest ebb it's been in the last few years. But then it's that process of dealing with that low ebb and sort of coming through it is probably why I got the award. But I kind of looked at it and was like, if you come and see me 12 months ago, we were smashing it. We had more sheep. We were making a lot of money. Things were very good, and now it's very difficult, but it's that resilience, I think. And it was cool. So I got nominated and then shortlisted, which was surprising in itself. And against some other really great folk, some of which I've met, some of which I haven't. And got my first ever Zoom kind of call was the judging process, and there was there was the previous winner and a few other people, and a guy from the Henry Plum Foundation whose name escapes me, but absolute legend, total gentleman, like really, really nice guy. Like, it was lovely. And I basically talked to them. They laughed a lot. We laughed a lot. And I just thought, well, that was quite amusing. And they found me quite funny, but I won one. Do you know what I mean? Went to the night, got chaperoned by a friend of mine who is another long-suffering friend of mine, a girl called Nina, who basically came to be my +1 because I didn't want to go on my own. And I thought, taking a very attractive, confident young woman was a good thing, just in case there were any photos. So she came along with me, held my hand, and didn't drink too much. I, however, sat at the back of the room and drank my body weight in gin and tonics because that just seemed like a really good idea at the time. I was quite nervous, feeling a little bit like a fish out of water. It's quite lucky. There were actually some people there I knew. There's a chap called Neil Fell who does a lot of contract dipping. He was there as a previous winner and stuff. So it was great. It was a great night. But I'm just a bit socially awkward in these things. So drinking gin and tonics, and then people buying me gin and tonics. And then the new entrant category is one of the last category. So it comes up on the screen, blah, 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 and the winner is JJ Life Solutions. And I'm just like, Nina looks at me and just starts laughing. And I'm like, oh. So I then sort of like stumble, not, it wasn't that bad, but sort of go up the stage, like, hi, like get my hand shaking, stuck there with a thing, snap photo, and then get dragged off the stage to a Farmer's Guardian interview where I just came across like an absolute tit. Just like, oh, why did you get into sheep farming? What makes you so passionate? I like dogs. I really like dogs. And I quite like sheep too. Anyway, and then they thrust a bottle of bubbly into my hand, and that was the end of that. So, it was an awesome night, really good night. Met some lovely people, most of which probably were wondering what the hell I was on about. Because by that point, I was on cloud 9, as you can imagine. Lots of gin and tonics, just won an award. Sent a photo to my mum, who was like made up. It was great. So that was really cool. It was a really nice night. It was nice to get recognised for, I've had a lot of shit in the last few years. Like, it hasn't been easy.
For sure.
And there are some good friends of mine who are just like, one of them said a while ago, we had a bad do. So someone else's sheep got in with one group of my sheep a couple of lambings ago, just before lambing, a few lambings ago. And basically, we were a closed flock, and we didn't vaccinate for enzootic abortion then. And we had I think about 1,200 ewes on bales, with a water trough in the centre and on fodder beet. And anyway, like, one of the sheep got in, must have already aborted and dribbled into the water trough. They don't abort if they're infected like within 3 or 4 weeks of lambing. So they abort the next year. So the next year, I think I picked up 800 dead lambs out of that flock in about 3 weeks.
Oh, Jesus.
Yeah, so that's like, it was, that's a year when they were like, lambs were doing 100 and something pound a head. So I probably picked up 100 grams worth of lambs dead in about 3 weeks, and they weren't all dead. They were being born alive. But enzootic abortion is like placentitis, so it affects like glucose and oxygen across the placenta. So they've been born, looking absolutely fine. Half an hour later, on their side, stretch their neck, hypothermic. Just, you get some of them back. And I've never had a lambing like it. It's the I drove to the top of the hill just at Kingsclear nearby, and I actually sat in my truck and cried like a small child for quite a long time before going back to the house. And yeah, it was bad. Like I think Easter bank holiday weekend, I've got a Toyota Hilux, and I filled the tray in the back. It was empty, and I filled it. It was like mounded. Do you know what I mean? The whole thing with dead lambs. Like I've never seen anything like it. After that, my friend was like, "If you survive this, like mentally or financially, I will be incredibly impressed." And we survived. We sold more ewe lambs. We didn't keep many. We sold some of the older ewes off. I did more contracting. Lamb prices went up. I did some other stuff and tightened my belt, and we survived. And there's been a whole I have shitty luck. It's turning around now. I seem to be getting better luck, but over a few years I've had some pretty shit luck. Whether that says something about me as a person and it's karma coming back to bite me in the arse, or whether it's just and I think sometimes if you stick your neck out enough and you put yourself forward enough, you unfortunately, as much as it does work out, sometimes it doesn't always. So shit goes wrong. But we vaccinate for enzootic abortion now, because that was the worst thing I've ever experienced. That and lambing outside during the Beast in the East was probably two of the things that would give me like farming PTSD.
The only thing, I mean, the thing with the EAE there is, one, impacts months and months before, not realizing what's coming, and then the sickening feeling of them being born fine, not fine, but you thinking they're fine, and then them not be, and the major, let's even forget finance, the mental toll that must have been hell. The Beast from the East, you're at least in it, and you were fighting what you could at the time, but
the worst thing about the enzootic thing was just the fact that the vet came out. We've got an awesome vet. So we use a practice called Larkmead, which is down in Oxfordshire. There's a vet there, a guy called JP Crilly, James, who is probably one of the best sheep vets, if not the best sheep vet in the country, incredibly knowledgeable guy. Right. And he came out and was just like, you're right, it is what you think it is. And this is the worst case that anyone's ever seen. And even the drug companies were interested. And it was just, he just said to me, there's nothing you can do apart from ride it out. You can do certain things with jabs, certain things, with
for sure,
Alamycin, Oxytet and stuff like that to try to slow it down. But he was like, what is going to happen is going to happen, and it could get really, really bad. And it did get really, really bad. And it was, I phoned him in tears at least once, and that was shit. And like you said, you kind of, it just came out of nowhere. And lesson learned in a sense. We used to vaccinate and hadn't vaccinated for years, for being a closed flock and generally not having other people's sheep around. But yeah, it was horrendous. So there's a load of stuff like that which has been really difficult, and it's quite badly affected my mental health at various points.
Would have,
yeah, it does, and it affected people various, the various occasions, the different things, loss of ground, all this stuff. It's affected relationships at the time, and there were definitely people that, maybe rightly or wrongly, I'm not with anymore because of how I probably dealt with certain stresses and certain things. Not like a nasty, violent, horrible human being.
No, I know what you mean, though, yeah.
Nobody wants to live with somebody who is just in a dark, black place for a lot of the time, especially if they are, either if they're also involved in it or if they're not. And it's just like, why does my other half keep coming home basically in a very black place? So yes, the award was kind of funny because it was nice. At this point in my farming career, I would feel really sham to get sheep farming award, because I think there's so much more scope of what I can do, so much further I can take what I do. But that was something that I was like I don't feel massively comfortable with those sort of things. And actually that award was I'll take that. And I feel quite happy being I can see, now looking back, I can kind of see why I won, because you're there's been a lot of shit and we're still here, and we're still kind of, that probably sounds really arrogant saying, see why I won. But, we've taken a lot of shit, we're still going, and still, as much as I can get down and negative, sometimes we're going in the right direction. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, definitely.
So we're still going. I'm an overall positive person who is prone to massive spikes of negativity, if that makes sense. Really oh, life is terrible, woe is me, this is all awful. And then an hour later, well, fuck this. Sorry, that's my one swear for the thing. You know, we're gonna pick ourselves up because there's no point moaning about it. There's nothing we can do, or if there is something we can do, we better crack on and do it, because crying about it didn't solve anything. It never solves anything. Do you know what I mean? And nobody wants to be around that guy. You know, everyone has limited patience for a bit, you know, like, but no one wants to be around the guy who's always like, oh, it's all terrible. Whoa. You know, so you just have to pick yourself up and go, right, best foot forward, head down, bore on, and let's just make it work and see where the ride goes. And it's like this thing now, if I don't put this tender in for this ground, if I don't get this ground, it's very likely that I'll probably sell all or most of my sheep in lamb in the spring. And then if I do that, then I'll probably go lambing for longer in Germany with Wolfgang and do a few other bits. And the lady who we have tack sheep from, usually I'll go and give her a hand lambing because she's absolutely lovely. And then, you know, I might go on holiday to, I quite fancy the Northern Territories, Australia, to go and ranch cattle. That's kind of a running theme. My friend's getting annoyed at this. I better go and do it sooner or later. Like, you know, I fancy a proper adventure again. So that's kind of,
sounds like a holiday that does, James.
Yeah, well, that's what it was. Wherever I go, I want to, like, I'm dog obsessed. Like, dogs are my life. People always like the sheep guy, and it's like, no, I just farm sheep because of the dogs, really. And I like, you know, I've got all kinds of other dogs, and I like working dogs. So yeah, anywhere I can go and mess around with dogs, and preferably stock, then I'm chuffed to bits. That's me happy, you know.
Well, I'll tell you now, I'm a cat man. He's just going to leave now, I think.
I know. Well, you know, to be fair, I did for a brief period of time have 2 cats. They were quite cool, but
I love how they always fight you. I love it.
They're just. I find them fascinating as a kind of as a creature, and I've kind of alluded quite a few times. I like hunting, so they are, you know, they're just amazing. Like, in that sense, they are the most amazing adapted. Like, obviously, some domestic cats not so much, but just the way they are, like, they are fascinating, very intelligent, awesome creatures. I just, you know, you try and round up sheep with a cat, mate, and it's really difficult.
Yeah, no, I think that's why we go with sheep dogs instead of sheep cats.
Yeah.
It's here. We've went anthropology, sheep, dogs, cats, positivity, negativity, and you're talking about awesome creatures at the minute. And I want to try and end on some kind of a really positive note. And there is a lovely story that you told me and sent me a video of a few weeks ago.
Yes,
I think it's a top thing to end on. So could you tell, you know exactly what I'm talking about?
So Mabel the Muntjac. So she's called Mabel now. So basically, out and about, would it be a month ago now? It's got to be at least that. Yeah, it's just over a month ago. So out and about a month ago, and the car in front of me clipped basically a Muntjac doe. And if for anyone who knows about Muntjac, they're a Asian invasive deer, little deer. We have a lot of them around here, and they breed all year round. So actually, best policy, like best practice or whatever, is when people shoot them around here, you should shoot, sounds awful, but pregnant does, because if they're not pregnant, there's a good chance they've got a dependent. So anyways, this doe was there, not in a very good state at all, and unfortunately really heavily pregnant. Dispatched her, which is awful, and then noticed her belly was wiggling, and just thought, oh man. And I had a knife on me. This is going to sound like horrendous. Had a knife on me. So I was like, well, you know, nothing ventured, nothing gained. So I C-sectioned her, as you do, and removed said baby Muntjac, who, much to my surprise, was vaguely alive. Swung it around as you do a pet lamb, rubbed it, gave it mouth to mouth. So there's a 6'3" bearded dreadlock man, you know, like bent over this tiny, and they are small. They're like fit in your hand size. Muntjac, like giving it mouth to mouth and rubbing it, and then dashing back across the fields, like surrounded by my dogs with like this little Muntjac, like wrapped in my jacket, this tiny little thing. Got her home, and then gave her some colostrum, got her warm. Didn't think she'd really make it. Phoned a friend of mine who's a vet nurse, managed to get a little kitten bottle. Got her on a kitten bottle, and she was quite surprised. The next day she was still alive, and I had her for a few days. loving life, brilliant. And basically I'm driving around all the time and everywhere, and they need quite a lot of kind of care and attention. So there's a lad I know called Johnny, who used to be a deer keeper at Woburn Abbey. So he's deer mad, and he's reared a few. And so I took her down to Sussex, and so she now lives Johnny's head keeper on an estate, and she now basically thinks she's a spaniel. So Mabel the Muntjac is now eating solid food. She's eating, she's grazing, eating apples. She's only about 6 weeks old, and she thinks she's a cocker spaniel. So she runs the hill with the cockers, is as biddable as a dog, and is a proper demanding little madam. So there's now a Mabel the Muntjac who is down there, and actually they've got friends of mine down there as well. I've got a fallow who they also bottle reared called Lola, right, who will run up to you and put a hooves on your shoulders and give you a kiss. And we have a little bit of another good friend of mine bottle reared a Seeker stag, which we help bottle rear. So they're cool animals, but like the Muntjac, they're little, and it's like it's like a dog.
Well, the video you sent me, man, was just walking around with the dogs in the house. I was like, this is the cutest thing.
Yeah.
You said it starts negative. It starts negative that the mother get hit, but after that, I don't think it's negative at all.
No. Well, you've got to try, and I think that's probably a metaphor for life, right? Try and make something good out of a shitty situation.
Yeah.
And that is a pretty good metaphor. And I'm just a massive softie. I am a massive softie. I love animals to bits. Do you know what I mean? And I've got quite a sort of soft spot for deer. I like eating them as well, don't get me wrong. Yeah. I just think they're fascinating creatures. So Mabel is now living the dream. She's living her best life. And I'm going to go and visit her soon. So she's a good girl.
No, brilliant little story to end on. But before we end, I don't know how many episodes you've listened to, James. There's 2 questions I ask everyone. The first one being, where do you see yourself in 5 years? And the second being, and you've done many of these throughout, if you had any tips for folk coming into farming, what would they be?
Oh, right. Where do I see myself in 5 years? Well, so somebody asked me today, what am I doing on the 11th and 12th of January? Because they wanted to come out and film something. And I was like, I can't tell you what I'm doing at 11 o'clock tonight, let alone the 11th and 12th of January. So
I know
5 years.
This is fun. I know you can't say. Yeah.
Well, no, yeah. So it's one of those things where I'd like to see myself in 5 years. I'd like to have a secure block of ground, secure holding, and I would like to be running my business out of that, running a decent number of stock, and I'm really into genetics and stuff like that. So I'd like to be top 5%. Do you know what I mean? I'd like to be top 1%. But
where do you think you are currently?
Right now,
percentage wise,
in terms of sheep knowledge, I'd be pretty well up there. But I think in overall farming at the moment, I'd be lucky to be probably top 30%. But still, it's definitely I'd be a first.
I think you shot yourself. Yeah,
I'd be a first. I'd definitely be I'm just above a 2-1. Do you know what I mean? I'm definitely getting. I remember from university, 70% and above was a first. But
but should we be promoting a world in which the top 30% are getting first? I don't think so.
No, I don't think so either. But that's a whole other story. But I without being arrogant, I very rarely meet many people who know more about sheep and how to profitably, sustainably farm sheep, at least within the systems that we do. There are people who know a shitload more about high intensive indoor whatever, but in terms of sustainable grass-based grazing systems, profitable grazing systems, profitable regenerative agriculture, integrating livestock into arable and stuff like that, I consider myself to be pretty well up there. And I've got, I'm blessed to have good dogs, which helps a lot. So take the dogs away and I start falling quite far down the stakes. But I like trying to be as good as I can possibly be at something.
Oh, yeah.
And so that's kind of that. It's just when I said sort of top 30%, I just mean at the moment, the last kind of couple of years, especially this year, the sheep have taken a knock. They're not what I would like them to be, or where they would like to be as a business quite, but we'll get there. But where I'd like to be is, I'd like to be right top percent, and having a secure holding would be a massive part of that. And I'd also like to, in 5 years' time, I'm 38. I'd love to have a partner and kids. I don't have any kids. A very small family. There's currently me, mum, and dad. That's it. Really, well, they've got extended family, but those are the people I spend, have the most contact with. I'd love to have children. I'd love to have like a little mini me and a sidekick, and a couple of kids to drag around getting in trouble with. But so that would be cool. And failing all that, I'd like to be ranching loads of cattle in the Northern Territories of Australia while looking like Crocodile Dundee. So that's like backup plan B.
I like the Crocodile Dundee idea. It sounds fun.
Yeah. And then advice. You say advice for people getting into farming.
Yeah, I mean, I think you've thrown in hundreds already. Just try and what would you say? Summarize it.
I think if I had to sort of give a little bit of advice to people trying to get into farming, it would be real. Like, be real, like be who you are, and be like, you don't have to be a hero. You just have to be a genuine, real person who's willing to put your best foot forward, graft, have a good go. And it's attitude. Like, you can teach, like, to a point. Obviously, aptitude, there is a skill level which some people are just good stock people and some people aren't, but you can teach a lot of aptitude. It's much more difficult to teach attitudes. If somebody has got a positive, cheery, kind of go-getting outlook, it's not easy because life sometimes sucks. But if you can, if you can try hard to be somebody who people want to be around and want to work with and want to sort of, help, and you can have the right attitude, and when you get smacked down, you can kind of get back up and shrug it off. You will get a long way. You will get somewhere. You might not get to where you thought you were going to get or thought you wanted to get, but you will get to somewhere. People will reach out to you and help you, and like, just try and have a positive mental attitude. And the other thing I think is just like, look after yourself. That's something that I haven't really said or talked about. At the end of the day, it's just farming. Like, it's just a job. It is a lifestyle. People always say that, but it's a job, and it's very easy to forget that if you're not happy, there's not a lot of point. Like, if it makes you happy, do it. And there's always going to be difficult times and sad times and hard times. But at the end of the day, if it is making you miserable for an extended period of time, then maybe it's not for you. That's fine. You know what I mean? But like, and then I think also there's many different ways to get into farming and be a farmer, and different capacities and different sectors and stuff. And, don't worry about what other people think. Don't worry about what other people are doing, apart from to learn from them and stuff like that. Just be you, be real, have a good attitude.
Good stuff. Yeah.
You're a long time dead. Do you know what I mean? So,
that's a discussion we don't need to get into, but I just feel something else after, but we don't need to get into that. No. I just can't imagine how it stops. But anyway, it does. I know, but I don't know. What was I going to say? You mentioned that we say it's a lifestyle. We do, and it is. But that is somewhat of a thing we've got to change on its own. The idea of the industry saying it's a lifestyle as a sort of scapegoat for having to pay people correctly is a pandemic.
That's one of my massive bugbears. It's just a lifestyle. It's not a job. Well, no, like we are producing food to feed the nation. It's a fairly important job. Do you know what I mean? It should be something which is valued and paid fairly and respected and seen as a profession. And like, you should be seen like we are. Someone said the other day to me, this is like no word of a lie. They were like, well, it's farming is easy, isn't it? You don't have to be particularly smart. It's just like turn out a few cows, chuck a bit of straw about, move a bit of shit. Like, it's not clever, it's not hard. Like, anyone could do it. And you're like, Jesus, mate, like, it is an incredibly, like, you go and look at what the average, farmer does and deals with. And, one day you're a plumber, one day you're a vet, one day you're a business person, one day you're managing people and all these different things. And now, you're measuring grass, you're dealing with genetics, you're doing all this stuff. And it is a skilled profession, and a good farmer, stock person, whatever, which is what we said earlier on, should be paid the same as professional anything else. I would value value a really good stock person, good shepherd, whatever, at that kind of 40k professional salary kind of thing. It's I think it's really important that, yes, it's a lifestyle, but also it's a bit different if you just have a family farm and no bills and something like that. You can probably subsist on survive on a low level subsistence. But for people, all the young people coming into the industry from outside of farming, we've got to pay rent and bills, and my house rent's like 20k a year. You know what I mean? It's like I need
what
to
is
earn
it? Buckingham Palace?
No, I live in Hampshire, mate. If I live in Scotland, it would be like 50%. And this is the thing. So a lot of the opportunities for livestock and stuff like that are in the eastern counties. We're in the south, and unfortunately, it's bloody expensive here. £6 a pint in the local pub, eh?
I kind of want to make you feel a bit jealous. My mortgage is £289 a month.
Yeah, I hate you a little bit. Yeah, this is the crazy thing. So, there's a lot of people, without wanting to go on to a totally different topic, who can't get a mortgage because they haven't got enough of a deposit to put down. But the bank will quite happily take 20 grand a year off them in rent.
Yeah.
So they're there for 5 years. That's 100k. But because you don't have 100k to put a deposit down on a house, you can't have one. And down here, and it is, I look at houses up north at 100k for a house. There's a house in the village here, not a particularly amazing house, £1 million.
Yeah, it's mad. And I mean, we're a totally different topic. We've kind of done this today. Yeah, this is fun that way. My ex and I bought a house last July, and I would say it had a seventh of an acre of garden, right? A fair chunk of garden. 124 meters of floor space, 2 floors, had all been redone, stairwell, a bathroom, an ensuite bedroom, and 3 bedrooms, nice kitchen, all revamped, in a nice area, and that was 185,000. It's nothing, mate. It is nothing. This flat,
mate of mine showed me a house, a 3-bedroom house, townhouse, fairly well done, up in a kind of grove on a estate up in, like a nice estate up in Hartlepool, and it was I want to say it was like 65 grand.
It's just madness, isn't it? Yeah,
it's just utterly mental.
Yeah, it is. But here, we've been speaking for a good month now. I literally didn't know your name until yesterday. I genuinely didn't. I've asked you, like, JJ, what's your name? I assume it's James, and you've never said yes. But so
my name's James.
I had to Google Farming Awards and look for the weird looking one. I mean, the
one with all the hair.
Yeah, for sure. It's been great to finally talk to you. And for those of you listening, if you're interested in getting into farming, I don't think there's many better person to talk about it than the person that won New Entrant of the Year for the country in the last couple of months. So thank you for that, James. I hope.
On that note, Wallace, if anyone does have any questions or anything like that, then I live alone and spend a lot of time alone. Like, I am more than happy to, speak to people over Instagram, whatever, to give my number out and chat to people. If anyone's ever got any questions about anything from sheep to, how to get into the industry or anything like that, like, I am more than happy to speak to them. So
if you want to get in touch, it's JJ Livestock on Instagram.
JJ Livestock UK.
Oh, is it JJ Livestock UK? I apologise. What I will say is I wouldn't give his number too quick, because I gave him my number about 3 days ago, and since then he's posted a photo of me and his discussion on Instagram, just leaving my number for all to see. Didn't even put my name in his phone.
I told you, not very technologically savvy.
yeah. I just hope you don't end up messaging your mum some of the shit you send me. So it's been a pleasure, mate. Really enjoyed it. Been cool to sit down and chat. We have been speaking for an hour and 48 minutes at the minute. It's been a good time. And unlike the much more, how will I say this? The much more skilled podcaster at Meet the Farmers podcast, I will not be editing it down at all. It will all be going.
I love the way that you tell me this now at the end, that you're not editing it.
Oh no, I'm not. at all. No. I always tell folk that at the end, so they never shut up. But no, it's been really good chat. Really enjoyed it. I hope everyone listens enjoyed. Next week we will be speaking to someone. I hope she does currently have malaria, so this might not be happening. Someone in Zimbabwe. She's okay though. Someone in Zimbabwe who is a blueberry agronomist, Blythe. So that's going to be a really cool chat. And then I believe we've got one more week, and then it's the Christmas special, who I'm not going to tell you who that is yet. I know you know them, James, but I don't know if you know who it is, but you know who they are. But I appreciate you coming and listening. Hope you've enjoyed, and we shall see you next week.
Well, that's it. Another R2Kast finished. Another agricultural mind opened up. And I would just like to say that getting these guests on board, it does take time, and it always has done. But I've now went weekly, and with that comes even more time required. And I would just like to finally thank once more the Scottish Farmer for sponsoring the show and making that much more possible. Please be sure to get in touch if you've any ideas of people you'd like to see on the podcast, or maybe ideas you have for me presenting better, because I definitely do require that. See you in the next one.